It's time for a running back deep dive with Matt Hicks here on RotoViz Overtime. We're going to be talking with Matt on today's show, and we're lucky that we are going to have a little bit of a series here with a couple of additions as we go through the different position groups to get his thoughts as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. It's rapidly starting to get closer. I know it feels still a bit away, but when we were talking about the combine, it felt like it was quite a bit away, and it's long gone at this particular moment in time. So, Sean, we've got Matt on. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know you're excited for this one. For anyone who hasn't followed Matt on social media already, you can do so at the FF_educator. We have him on each season prior to the draft, and a little bit of an annual tradition at this point, so we had to keep it going right about now. The rookie big board, we'll get a chance to tell you about that a little bit later in the show as well. But Sean, I know rookie prospect evaluation is one of your favorite things to do. We have the RotoViz rookie guide out at the moment, but I know you are excited here to get talking to Matt.
Yeah, we love to get behind the scenes from all of the best draft analysts out there who do this all year round. And this is a fascinating class, especially at the position we're going to discuss in today's show. We're going to jump right in. Matt, TreVeyon, Henderson, Omarion, Hampton, Quinshon, Judkins all looked great at the combine. I don't think that was a huge surprise. They all have extended stretches of dominating elite competition. Does this combination of athleticism and proven production, does that put them in the same tier as Ashton, Jeanty? Is he still, we know the numbers with him are phenomenal, but is this a four-person group?
It's not for me. It is still Jeanty on his own in terms of being the top running back. And I think draft capital is really going to separate these guys in terms of that kind of consensus ADP. You know, even in Superflex leagues right now, we're looking at Ashton Jeanty as probably the 101. And so I think there's going to be a bit of an ADP drop. Hampton, I'm projecting in that 104 to 107 type range. And I think Judkins and Henderson will be kind of 107 to 109, 110. So I think there is a little bit of a difference there. Although with Hampton, Judkins, and Henderson, those guys are in a really tight tier. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a choose your flavor with which running back you like best.
With those three guys in particular, do you think like landing spot and draft position could, flip that order that you mentioned there a moment ago? Is it it's that close between them?
Yeah, I think so. Where I think those three guys might separate themselves a little bit is I feel fairly confident that Omarion Hampton's going to be a first-round pick. I wouldn't even be shocked if he goes in the late teens. I think Henderson is going to be a top 50 pick. I feel confident about that, but probably the third running back off the board. And I wouldn't be super shocked if Judkins slides outside of the top 50, just looking at the depth of this running back class, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot. I could see an NFL team, wanting to wait a little bit. And Judkins, as much as he has upside, he's got a few more question marks than Henderson or Hampton for me. So I think the draft capital might spread this tier out a little bit, with Judkins being the loser.
So we have this one set up as kind of a rapid fire round on this question, but you can feel free to expand on that if you want. Basically, the players that we talked about a moment, we're going to look at the closest comp for them and the best fit if you could drop them into the perfect spot for their skill set in the NFL at the moment. First up, though, Jeanty, where obviously we're expecting this to be in those probably first five picks of the NFL draft, but who's the closest comp and where would you like to see him end up?
For Jeanty, for me, guys, one of the things I know we talk about each year is I really struggle with the one-to-one stylistic comps. I really prefer in my process, I give value comps. So I think it's helpful for folks to think about, what's the type of production that a player is going to put in your lineup. And for me, Ashton Jeanty, I think he's going to come in as a top 6 running back right away as a rookie in terms of overall production. And so in terms of a value comp, I've been telling folks, I think he's going to make a very similar impact to what Jahmyr Gibbs did over the first couple of years of his NFL career, his fantasy football production. In terms of scheme, I really think that Jeanty is going to do best in a zone-based scheme. But quite frankly, guys, there's no such thing as scheme proof. But I think Jeanty is going to come in. He's going to have a high volume workload, whether he goes 6 to the Raiders, whether he goes 12 to the Cowboys. There's going to be an NFL team that puts heavy investment into him. And so I think he's going to hit the ground running pretty much no matter what scheme he goes to and fit.
So yeah, you throw out the Jahmyr Gibbs comp, and instantly we're very excited here to see what happens as we move forward. But it is, you know, a player to get very, very excited about. As we move down, then you mentioned some of the other potential slots in the draft you think they may go, but what about Henderson?
Yeah, Henderson for me, you know, I think that in terms of the running style we want to be looking for him, his scheme fit is going to match up a lot better with the zone run scheme. You know, that's especially what Chip Kelly leaned into. Chip Kelly kind of had a revolution a little bit. He came back to Ohio State, had some zone run scheme, and that was kind of different from, you know, the heavy RPO offense he was running. If you think in like the Marcus Mariota college era at Oregon. So we have a potential for a reunion with TreVeyon Henderson. You know, I think the Raiders sitting there at the top of round 2 could be looking at TreVeyon Henderson. We know Chip Kelly utilized him very well. That would be a really specific, interesting landing spot for him. And in terms of value comp, you know, I'm thinking of TreVeyon Henderson's going to come in and be a really solid running back too, right? So when I say that 12 to 23 range, consistent producer. And I've been trying to encourage folks to think about him the way you thought about David Montgomery in your lineup last year before he went down with injury. You know, give him a value boost for being young. And you have somebody who could be a really valuable ongoing rookie or ongoing dynasty asset, I should say, that you're using a late first round rookie pick on. So probably some really good opportunity there when you're adding TreVeyon Henderson to your roster.
Next up, Hampton.
Yeah, Hampton's just fun. I love him. Probably a guy who will do a little bit better in a gap scheme, but he's a power back. And I think, I've been kind of comparing him to Kenneth Walker a little bit, just in terms of his ability to kind of be that lead power back in an offense. Maybe he doesn't have that top home run play ability, but if he does have space, he does have good long speed, and he does have the ability to get downfield. I think one thing that Kenneth Walker wasn't given enough credit for coming out of college was his vision. I thought he did very well. And if you look at that offensive line that Omarion Hampton was playing behind at North Carolina this year, man, it was really, really tough. And so I've noticed that we're not talking a ton about Hampton's vision, but he did a whole lot with a little. So I think that it gives him a little bit more, comfortability. Some of these running backs, I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit later here, you really worry about their landing spot. I don't worry as much about Hampton's landing spot because he's shown he can do it behind a rough offensive line already.
The last one then is Judkins, and the question I'm just going to follow up with is the names we've talked so far. You mentioned like the landing spot and how things could work out, and then kind of a little bit of fear for some of the guys maybe later. Are you confident that the 4 names here can come in and lead an NFL backfield instantly week 1 as a rookie?
So the one guy that I'm worried about is Judkins. And so for me, Judkins, you're leaning more into the upside. So if you're a fantasy player that likes risk, I understand you prioritizing Judkins over a guy like Henderson or possibly even Hampton. I wouldn't, but I could see that process. He's got home run playability. He's got excellent acceleration. He's got really nice elusiveness in space. And he's got some good just general home run playability. Where I struggle with Judkins is his vision. I don't think he's somebody who creates his own space. And you could see, especially in Lane Kiffin's offense at Ole Miss, he's running in really wide open gaps created for him. And you could see that to a degree at Ohio State as well. So Judkins is the one guy out of this group who I don't think will be drafted to be, or I should say, I'm not confident he will be drafted to be, that 40 to 60% of the market share type guy on his NFL offense, right? Hampton, we're probably looking at 55% of those touches. Henderson, 45 to 50%. Jeanty's probably going 60% plus. Judkins, he might be more in that 35 to 40% range, which isn't a bad spot to be in at all. But it does mean he's probably going to have a comparable backfield mate. And we know, right, guys, like there's not a lot of NFL running backs that have a full backfield to themselves. So if you're a Judkins fan, it's not damning by any means in terms of his fantasy ability, but it does mean the production might be a little less consistent than some of the other backs we've talked about.
Yeah, we've gone from 6-7 years ago wanting somebody to have the majority of the work to now if it's split between 2 rather than 3. You're thinking we're in good shape here. The next tier then is Kaleb Johnson and Skattebo. Are they the next tier? And then with the combine performances of of Giddens and Tuten, do they close in on that group?
Yeah, my next tier is a little bit wider. It's got a couple more guys in it, but Johnson and Skattebo are in that tier. For me, Skattebo, I find I'm a little bit higher than consensus on, and Johnson, I'm a little bit lower than consensus on. And so with Johnson, for me, good vision. He displayed that, especially if you look at like the Minnesota tape. He had some really good games where you could see him feeling space very well, and you had some games where he was overthinking it, getting caught behind the line of scrimmage. But overall, you think his vision is going to be pretty solid. He's got really nice play strength. If you're somebody who likes power backs, good lower body strength, he absorbs contact very well. I do think his scheme is a little bit more limited. I think you want to see him in a gap-based concepts. And so that does limit his landing spots a little bit. There's a lot of folks out there that are convinced he's a top 50 draft pick. He's not for me. I think he's a late day 2 pick, which is perfectly fine draft capital. That still checks the box there, but not as much as, some of the guys in that second tier. And there are plenty of analysts who I do think would put Kaleb Johnson in that second tier, but I have a bit more of hesitations in that sense. Cam Skattebo, he's not going to be for everybody. He has some really fantastic explosive playability. He's got that good start-stop explosiveness that I love to see from running back prospects. I like his ability to work in between the tackles. He gets in and through his cuts very well. I think he is an excellent extension of the passing game as well. So if we're thinking about, projecting in terms of fantasy production, Skattebo, I think, has a shot to have a 50-60 target workload as a rookie. That's not something you could say about Kaleb Johnson, right? But I understand, 0-star recruit, 2 years at community college, transferred up at Arizona State. The production then naturally came a little bit later. He's a little bit older for a running back prospect. So I understand why folks are proceeding with caution. But in this class, with the way the second round is really building out overall, not just at the running back position, there's a chance Skattebo's going 207, 208, 209 in the super flex. And I think that's pretty juicy value myself.
The guy here who really jumps out, and so Tuten, right?
Yeah.
You've got actually fantastic peripherals before the combine, basically not even getting drafted in early best ball. Then you have the combine. Obviously, he's a riser, but the question is how far he should rise. Explain to us why he wasn't on the fantasy radar before the combine, and then the contrast eventually being, can he rise too high now as a result?
I really like Tuten. I actually did watch his tape prior to the combine because he got a Senior Bowl invite. Anybody who gets a Senior Bowl invite gets a tape review for me. And he really popped out. I got to tell you, maybe the reason he's flying under the radar is because, I love college football. I'm watching every Saturday, and I was not excited about the idea of flipping on the Virginia Tech offense this year. It's just not a really exciting unit. But when I watched him, you can see somebody who's very explosive. You can see somebody who's got good downfield acceleration. But he doesn't actually look super fast on tape. There's not a lot of examples of him having that downfield acceleration ability. So that's one of the reasons, he's risen so fast after the combine, is because you really can see that put into action, right? And it's applicable. You pull it outside of the context of the Virginia Tech offense. Where I'm still proceeding with some caution on Tuten, I think he's got inconsistent vision. If there's an open gap, he'll shoot it. He'll get downfield. He's decisive, but he's not creating his own space, right? And so that does limit him a bit for me. And just in terms of explosiveness, in terms of getting in and through his cuts, lateral explosiveness, you don't see a ton of it. So although he's a really fast straight line runner, I don't see him as somebody who's going to come into the NFL and be an immediate lead back. I think he's going to be a rotational runner. I still think he's going to go day 3, albeit early day 3, probably a round 4 type guy. And somebody who I put in my tier that I call flex filler, right? A low-end running back 3, a high-end running back 4, certainly a valuable guy to add to your roster if you can get him in the 3rd round of your rookie drafts, but not somebody who I'm prioritizing early despite a really good combine.
And then maybe my favorite guy here is Giddens. I kind of want to put him in that very top group. He's obviously not being drafted necessarily in that range, not necessarily ranked in that range, really almost in any context. Is it the K-State name on the jersey? Is it that it takes a little bit longer to get going than some of the really highly recruited guys, and if it takes you longer to get going and you weren't the big star recruit, that you're never going to get there unless you do something like 2,500 scrimmage yards? Or am I just overranking? What's holding him back from actually being a star?
DJ Giddens is fascinating to me. So I watched him back in summer scouting because I thought he had really good, what would that be, 2023 tape. So I watched him before the 2024 season, and I liked his film coming off of that year. I thought he looked fast. I thought that he looked good athleticism, especially lateral agility. I thought he had good lateral agility. And then he had the ability to really kind of build momentum moving downfield and played with good play strength as well. In the K-State offense in 2023 was a good offensive unit. Now that team fell off a cliff in 2024, and I think that's part of the reason that we dropped on DJ Giddens. But I did go back and I did watch 2024 film on him. And the reason he kind of got stuck in my system and in my approach is I just didn't see it with the vision. For me, that's a big red flag. That's not a trait that I have found translates to the NFL level. Like if you can't anticipate space, if you can't hit cutback lanes at the college level playing in the Big 12, you're probably not going to be able to do that in the NFL. And I didn't see Giddens with the ability to create his own space at the college level. Also, a little bit of suspect hands, what didn't contribute to the passing game at a high level, or at least display the traits that I was looking for. And so that's why I had a late day 3 grade on him, and I had kind of written him off. And then after the combine, now I went from being too high on him to too low on him. I think I've got to land somewhere in between. I still think he's going to be a day 3 guy. And I do think he's getting lost in the sauce a little bit, just in a strong running back class. But I don't know that he's somebody that we can realistically project on day 2 at this point in time and realistically project into, a significant volume workload. But I get it. I do understand what you like about DJ Giddens. And I got to tell you, I'm happy to see this narrative bouncing back to him.
So the next tier here, I've got a meaningful gap between RJ Harvey and Dylan Sampson, and then Jarquez Hunter and Ollie Gordon. But I think all 4 of these guys are going to end up being fantasy winners, especially if Gordon falls as far as I think. So I'm going to give you just some sort of quick headline descriptions of these players. You can tell me where they miss, what else we need to know. On Harvey here, we've got old, ultra productive, supremely athletic.
Honestly, you nailed RJ Harvey. The one thing I will add to that for context, I think he's an excellent pass catcher. And I think that could be a difference maker in terms of his fantasy value. I love the age discussion. Like, let's just keep pushing that up there. So he goes in the 4th round of my rookie drafts. If I get 2 good years out of a running back that I draft in the 4th round, I don't care. Like, he could be 30 if I can get 2 good years out of him.
How about Sampson here? We've got young and better than Jalen Wright.
Yeah, Sampson's interesting. I'm the resident Tennessee Vols fan, and I didn't love Jalen Wright, and I found myself lower on consensus on Dylan Sampson. I think for me, he's looked explosive, he's looked athletic, but he's running through some pretty big gaps at Tennessee, and that's just the context I can offer as a film analyst, but also as a Tennessee fan. And so this slow production for Jalen Wright wasn't a shock to me. I do like Sampson better than Jalen Wright. I will say, I think that he has a better profile than him and more upside to his skill set. But I think for the most part, you've got Sampson pegged well as well.
But for Hunter here, we've got sort of unheralded, given his SEC success, and then better than Tank Bixby.
Yeah, Jarquez Hunter, another guy who I do notice is popping a little bit more in the analytical models than we're getting kind of in the film circles. And, for Hunter, he's a situation for me that when you watch his film, nothing's bad, but nothing's good. He's very consistent. And I think when you look at his stats, right, you do see that as well. He produced early on. He had some really good seasons, especially in the context of the Auburn offense, which, and I would say I apologize to Auburn fans, but I don't think that they would argue with me. It's been bad, man. Like almost Hunter's entire career at Auburn, that offense has been bad. He stuck with it. He was definitely the leader of that offense. And, he was playing against stacked boxes, so you can excuse away a few more things. So I agree with that unheralded part. You know, he probably does deserve a little bit more respect, but I do think that as a prospect, I would still give Tank Bigsby the nod over Hunter. Just because I think with Bigsby, you could lean into a profile, a little bit more of a power back, you know, has a little bit more explosiveness. I struggle when I can't project a prospect into a specific role in the NFL, and that's where I'm at with Hunter right now.
And then finally with Gordon, big, slow, and lucky to have gotten such massive 2023 numbers.
Man, there were two players in this year's class that I desperately wanted to go back for another year at college, and Ollie Gordon was one of them, man. Really strong 2023 season and just an absolute cliff of a 2024 season. I mean, the production was awful. The film looked terrible. He looked incredibly indecisive. I mean, he looked weaker. Like his play strength was lower. Everything went down. And of course, the Oklahoma State offense went down. But I think that there would have been plenty of Big Ten, even SEC teams who would have wanted to add Ollie Gordon to their backfield. And I think he could have gone into a system where he had more space. He looked a lot better and you know, would be considered a day 2 guy in 2026. For 2025, I think he's going to be a day 3 pick. I think he could be round 6 or 7. You know, in terms of fantasy production, honestly, I've kind of written him off. I don't want exposure to him. I think his name recognition is strong enough where he'll still be, you know, around 4 ADP. So he'll still probably get drafted. But there's guys I like better in that 4th round range. And RJ Harvey, who we talked about earlier, being one of those guys.
So on Harvey, before we move on, were you surprised just how well he tested? Because, I mean, honestly, he tests like a guy who could be, you know, the second back off the board. And he's not going to be that with the rest of the context. But even if you liked him, and I thought that he was maybe the most fun guy. I mean, he and Giddens to me are the most fun guys to watch especially if you're mostly watching their highlights. And he looks that athletic, but it didn't seem like he possibly could have been expected to be quite that athletic in testing, again, based on perception.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You know, he looks fast on tape, but he almost looks play strength, play fast. You know, game speed is I guess the term I'm looking for here. But when he ran a 4.4, I was definitely shocked. I think he ended up being the 4th fastest running back in the draft. And, you know, I do think, like you said, if you took 2 years off his age and slapped an SEC logo on his jersey, we might be talking about him in that same tier as an Omarion Hampton. Different type of play style, but just in terms of that upside ability. And, you know, those are the guys that you want to look for later in your rookie drafts.
So then we continue to move down, or depending, move sideways. And we get a couple of interesting cohorts here where we have a small, fast group, and then we have a big, arguably undervalued group, but at least interesting group there. So let's start with the fast guys, right? How are Etienne, Brashard Smith, Jaydon Blue, how are these guys similar? How are they different?
Yeah, for Etienne, he's somebody who I really like. I have found myself above consensus on him consistently. I'm waiting for folks to catch on and back me up. Nobody has, so I'm going to stay on my Trevor Etienne island. You know, he's, for me, really start-stop explosive. That's where he stands out as a runner. He's also really confident and decisive in between the tackles, and I think he's elusive in tight space. And that's something I think he did very well at Georgia. Low production at Florida, low production at Georgia. So when you watch the film, you know, it's really good, but I understand why folks are kind of hesitant on him because he's never consistently put it all together in one season. Brashard Smith, I absolutely love. You know, high recruit type guy, never really got the shot at Miami, transfers to SMU and just absolutely balls out. Super athletic, fast. Where he stands out compared to this group of Etienne and Blue is he's an excellent pass catcher. So if you're looking for a PPR specialist here, that's the type of role that you're going to see Brashard Smith in. And I don't say that in a way where he can't win on the ground. He absolutely wins on the ground. He's got good feel for space. He's decisive, but he has excellent handwork ability. He has excellent ability to actually work routes beyond just, you know, targets in the flat. And so I think he could be a really effective weapon for an NFL team where, although Etienne is a little undersized, he doesn't necessarily have that pass catching ability. And quite frankly, with Jaydon Blue, that's just not somebody who I'm excited about at all. I think he had plenty of opportunity at Texas to stand out. He really did not win that job consistently. Even when, CJ Baxter went down, they had a whole slew of injuries and he still couldn't win the job. I don't think on tape he looks super athletic. He struggles with seeing the field. And so I know the combine has revived him, but there's just not enough there for me to be interested personally.
So then we have a group of bigger backs. And it's interesting because the production and the athleticism, explosiveness, what have you, might point in different directions. How are Devin, Neal, Rocket Sanders, Damien Martinez, and Tahj Brooks? Again, how are they similar? How are they different here?
Yeah, I love Devin Neal. That's my dude. And that's kind of my guy. I'm drafting him in the second round of rookie drafts if he's there all day. I love his vision. That's where he stands out compared to these other guys, and I think compared to the class in general. Neal was running against 8 and 9 stacked boxes. Defenses knew that he was the focal point, and he consistently won. Neal is the type of guy where, you watch 2 games of tape of him, you might not be super impressed. You watch 8 games of tape on him like I have, and you see over time just how steady of a producer he is. Look at his box scores back. I think he's got over 30 100-plus yard rushing games in college. I could be getting that stat wrong, but it is the vast majority of his collegiate games, and he did play 5 years at Kansas. So he is somebody who I really, really like. Excellent lateral strength as well, and he does win in short yardage situations. But Damien Martinez, the running back out of Miami, he is somebody who I think specializes in those power-based opportunities. He's excellent between the tackles. He wins at the goal line. And you look at Martinez, he's somebody 2 really awesome seasons at Oregon State before transferring to Miami. And, you that definitely gives you pause. Is he winning against Pac-12 competition, which still was the Pac-12 at the time? Or is he winning against, is he struggling when he gets to the ACC? What I noticed with Damien Martinez is when you watch games where he rushes the ball over 20 times, he is so much better of a running back. Some of these guys, they take a little bit longer to get going and they wear defenses down over time. And Martinez he came in a little cut up. I think he was listed 235 in playing weight. What did he come in at the combine? 217, 219, I believe. But even if you look at his games in Miami, watch the Pop-Tarts Bowl. When Damien Martinez had to be the guy, he looked powerful and he looked like he had some really nice downfield acceleration as well. So Neal and Martinez are my top 2 guys in that sense. With Rocket Sanders, I think you're seeing somebody who has some good downfield acceleration ability, a little bit less upside, in my opinion, a little bit less athletic, less decisive as a runner compared to Neal or Martinez. I think the vision is maybe the most stark difference between those 3 guys. And Tahj Brooks, I'm glad you talked about Tahj Brooks because I feel like almost nobody's talked about him. I watched his film and I got excited. And one of the things that made me excited about his film as a bigger back, like you mentioned, is he's got some good hands. And so he does work well between the tackles. He's got a good power profile as well, similar to the others. But I think he's a really nice extension of the passing game. And that's somebody who, if he might be going round 6 still, round 7 of the NFL draft, but that's somebody worth keeping an eye on. Slide him onto your taxi squad, or if you've got deeper rosters, he's definitely stashable. There's something there with the Texas Tech running back.
Can we get a Doug Martin comp for him?
Oh, I could see it. The muscle hamster.
That's right.
It's compact too.
I still think Doug Martin's trying to get everyone to forget the nickname. It seemed like that was a big agenda throughout his career, but I don't think it's ever going away. As we get ready to close out here, is there anyone else that we haven't talked about that you're excited about, or maybe somebody who you feel consensus is overblowing at this particular point? But I'm sure you have some more names in the heading away.
I got 3 guys, and I promise I'll be quick here. But Jordan James, I really like his film. He looks super twitchy and athletic. Terrible combine. I mean, just a terrible combine. I was really having hope for him that he would look fast in Indianapolis, and he didn't. But you know what? If that means he falls to the 5th round of my deeper leagues or the 4th round of my 16-team leagues, and I could use a late flyer on him, he passes the eye test in terms of film. Like I mentioned, he's twitchy, he's athletic. He looks like he's got a really nice second gear and downfield acceleration. One guy who I really like as well, Woody Marks at a USC. Not a lot of hype for Woody Marks, but if you look at him as a pass catcher, he spent his first 3 seasons in college in Mike Leach's air raid offense at Mississippi State, and he has awesome passing numbers. And then he went to USC and really proved that he could do it on the ground as well. So I think he's got really good versatility and somebody who could be a really, really sneaky stash for fantasy purposes. And then somebody who, guys, quite frankly, he was the 75th player I watched on film. And one of the reasons I watch so many guys is because I always get impressed. I find somebody deep in my film review. And that was LeQuint Allen for me this year out of Syracuse. He looked really good on tape, really nice lateral movement ability, and another guy with really good hands. And when I'm looking for running backs to take late as kind of those, just throw your darts, look for those late round steals. If they have pass catching ability, for me, that really helps in kind of leading into the upside of taking a shot in the late rounds of my rookie draft. So LeQuint Allen is one of those guys as well. But as you can see, as we're talking through here, I talked about some hesitations, but overall, it's a really deep running back class. And my goodness, do we need it after last year?
You talked about watching 75 guys. Is there any chance the Delaware back was one of them? Do you have any interest in Yarns?
So I will admit I've watched Yarns, and I don't watch highlight film, but sometimes when I can only get FCS highlight film, that's what I've watched on Yarns. And I thought he had a good, I thought he did impress in this kind of draft season process. I think he's got good speed, and I think he's got that good profile, but for me, the lateral movement ability wasn't really there. And I don't think that he worked very well in space, despite the fact that he was playing against FCS competition. My rule is if I'm watching FCS tape, you have to dominate FCS opponents. And I thought he looked very good, but he wasn't dominating. So at that point, I prepped him for the Senior Bowl, but kind of left him lower in the rankings.
So that is where we are going to close out this edition of RotoViz Overtime. This is with Matt Hicks. Matt, I mentioned at the start the rookie big board. Obviously this is probably a pretty chaotic time of year as you get ready for the draft, having all the profiles and so much or so on done. Let the listeners know though what you've got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd encourage anybody who enjoys this discussion, this type of content, head on over to patreon.com/rookiebigboard. I talked about, I've actually watched over 80 players in this year's class. I've got film reviews, full articles on each of these guys. Just before jumping on for this recording, I was working on our rookie guide, which drops at the end of this month. We have a Discord. The thing about our rookie rankings is we're doing it all year round. So I've really put a lot of time in. Most of these guys have 8+ games of film. And so if you're looking for a good film opinion to balance out with kind of your overall rookie draft process, I think the rookie big board is a really nice spot to be at. And it's also we have a really fun community over there as well. So really good action and a rookie big board podcast as well as YouTube.
That's awesome. We are going to be coming back with Matt for the wide receivers. So do make sure you are subscribed to RotoViz Overtime to get that once it is available. You can follow me on social media at Overtime Ireland. And of course, you can check out all of Sean's work up on rotoviz.com. Until we are back, have a good one.